I'm Billy Binion, criminal justice reporter at Reason. You've probably heard some wild takes on due process lately. Let's clear the air. Vice President J.D. Vance said, "The entire American media and left-wing industrial complex has decided the most important issue today is that the Trump admin deported an MS-13 gang member and illegal alien." Okay, so this has nothing to do with being left-wing, and everything to do with the Trump administration illegally deporting someone in violation of a court order and binding law to a prison with many others, where they're being held without due process. So what is due process exactly? Put simply, it is the legal principle that promises people the right to challenge the evidence against them before the government takes away their liberty. Is it possible that some people sent to a Salvadoran prison were in a gang? Yes. Is it also possible some were not in a gang? Yes. Which is precisely why we have due process, to test the integrity of the government's allegations. This is an American value, not a left-wing value. Right-wing influencer Jack Posobiec said, "Did Rachel Morin get due process? Did Laken Riley get due process?" No one ever asks that. So Rachel Morin and Laken Riley were murdered by immigrants, and that is horrible and tragic. But Posobiec's post implies he doesn't understand what due process is at a basic level. By his logic, we should abolish the doctrine for anyone accused of bad acts, which is exactly backwards. The point of due process is to provide fairness to people accused of crimes because the government doesn't always get it right. Because we said so isn't good enough. The Constitution protects unpopular people for a reason. Founder of Outkick, Clay Travis, said, "If the president can't deport illegal immigrants, then we have no border at all." Okay, so there is a big difference between merely deporting people and sending them to a notorious prison in El Salvador. President Nayib Bukele suspended basic civil liberties there over 3 years ago, like freedom of assembly and due process, so he could imprison people indefinitely without giving them their day in court. And it isn't relevant that the people deported weren't US citizens, because the Supreme Court has repeatedly confirmed that even immigrants suspected of being in the US illegally are still entitled to due process of law. Former Libertarian Party Chair Angela McArdle said, "I can't fully articulate this problem yet, but I think that libertarianism has been hijacked by radical empathy, and that we don't fully understand the concept of a right to a fair trial and the presumption of innocence. Libertarians have elevated it over all other rights and factors." So unless you want to argue that people like George Washington and James Madison had fallen prey to radical empathy, then this argument doesn't make sense. The founders made due process central to the Constitution, not because they loved criminals, but because they understood that any system of justice will give people a chance to publicly challenge the evidence against them before the government takes away their liberty indefinitely, as the government has done here. That should be important to anyone who cares about the Constitution and rule of law. Libertarians who believe the government is perfect and trustworthy is not a coherent ideology. If you love the Constitution, then you have to love due process.